Climate Hub webinar series. My name is Rob Fleming. I'm a volunteer with the Climate Hub, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's webinar. The Sioux Climate Hub is a citizen-led volunteer organization dedicated to locally advancing climate change mitigation and adaptation through education and engagement. In addition to the webinar series, we produce a quarterly newsletter and sponsor or participate in a variety of in-person events. We are also a chapter of the Global Climate Reality Project. You can reach us on Facebook at Sioux Climate Hub or by email at siouxclimatehub@gmail.com. We fully welcome new volunteers and participants. Our online webinars are held 6 times a year on the last Wednesday of the month, with the presentation followed by a question period. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, May the 30th, and will be given by Lauren Morin, the Community Enterprise Manager at Harvest Algoma. I'll say a bit more about that after Joanie's presentation. Video recordings of previous webinars are available on our Facebook page. Tonight, we're also happy to welcome participants from Climate Reality Project Canada and possibly attendees from other hubs across Ontario. At the end of Joanie's presentation, we will have a question and answer session with Joanie. And following that, everyone is welcome to stay for another 30 minutes or so when Sherry Wu from Climate Reality will lead a conversation on community updates and intel sharing among hubs. Okay. All right. All right. Tonight's presentation is by Joanie McGuffin, entitled Water Connects the Dots. Joanie is the Executive Director of the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy, a land trust directed at caring for the health and well-being of the Lake Superior watershed through conservation, education, and active participation. Joanie and her partner Gary are celebrated Canadian explorers, photographers, writers, speakers, documentarians, and conservationists. Over the past 40 years, multi-month canoe journeys have provided them with a unique perspective on water's connection to land and all of life, and to the people and places connected by waterways and forested landscapes. In tonight's presentation, Joanie will share some of the programs and projects of the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy. And on that note, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of, we are on the Robinson Huron and Robinson Superior Treaty Territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, and specifically the Garden River and Batchewana First Nations, as well as the settlement territories of the Métis people. And with that, I'd like to invite Joanie to begin.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me here this evening. I'm looking out here at spring has arrived. I'm not actually at home there near Lake Superior right now, but I'm watching another river flowing to the Great Lakes, the Muskoka, and it's just a beautiful time of the year. I think it's really a wonderful thing that we're doing, that you are doing in bringing community together. The whole entire conservation community is feeling quite, like in a very tippy canoe right now. And we're part of a network, the Great Lakes Network, and Freshwater Future, that stick handles the folks that get together all around the Great Lakes. Of course, our board is made up of American and Canadian citizens. And I'm just acknowledging this because it's so important, as our American, one of our American board members said that right now, community, coming together in community, doing things on small scale can be very, very, very important for people's mental health and well-being. So that being said, I'm going to, I think can I share my screen right now? Yeah, okay, we're good then. All right. Can everybody
Yeah,
see
that's
my
good.
screen okay? All right.
Yeah.
So water truly does connect the dots, connects the dots between us as humans with all of life. We as I go into our journey here, I love starting a presentation with this image. And in a recent educational program at the Canadian Bush Plain Heritage Center, it was so cute asking the students, why can we even see here? So the story was about the sun, and it was about radiation and the effect of radiation on the earth, and but the whole idea that this beautiful place is lit up, and that from outer space, from out in the space station or wherever you might imagine yourself to be here, that you could look down on the Great Lakes and you can actually see in the bow tie of the Great Lakes. It's such a beautiful place to live on Earth, to tell stories of water and the effects of the climate crisis, emergency, catastrophe, all those adjectives to describe where we are right now. The Great Lakes are such a haven of a place to care for, in freshwater being such an important part of our existence. And I just want today, Gary and I have been married 42 years, and it's almost exactly 42 years ago that we headed out on a journey that took us from the Gulf of St. Lawrence to the Beaufort Sea. And that voyage connected us by water. We had grown up paddling rivers and lakes, and Gary's north was Temagami, mine was here in Muskoka. But having the blessing of water all around us and the opportunity to get out in canoes, connecting to the land through water is such a wonderful opportunity to see that whether it's the trees or the forest or wherever, it's all more water than it is solid ground. And as we've paddled upstream and downstream and went across like this, we saw the importance of the connectivity of stories that connect us. And a friend of ours, an Indigenous artist and writer and poet, and Josie Fagan, I just love the way her hands hold the Great Lakes in this picture. And I always feel this sense of responsibility as we hold our hands and we hold the water. And the gift of telling stories of water on Lake Superior is that it's the greatest expanse of fresh water on Earth. We can see this great expanse from outer space. People often liken it to the shape of the head of a wolf, but it's all the waters that flow through those some 200 rivers flowing in, and only one, the St. Mary's, flowing out, Kitigan-Zibi, heading down to lower Lake Huron and Michigan, of course, Erie and Ontario, the lower Great Lakes out the St. Lawrence. And we love when we're doing our tours, just a really basic understanding of where water flows. It's really interesting when you get out on the water. So this kind of preceded and kind of set the table for us founding this organization in partnership with an American, Ruth Ogawa, who had worked with land trusts and with watershed councils in the Petoskey and Detroit area, doing a lot to protect places. And she really wanted to put together the idea of land trust with water council, water protection, because you really can't draw a line. And so there is a very faint line across the lake here. But as one of our Indigenous board members says, those are lines on the water, and those are artificial lines. And this beautiful green line holds the waters. It's the top of the watershed, and that's a real line on the lands of this planet. From all the water from the green line flows towards Lake Superior and down to the Atlantic. And so I always think this is such an important talking place too for talking about climate change. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Superior, is one of the fastest warming big bodies of water on the planet. And we're seeing that with the effects of the ice and its disappearance. In the winter, it's less ice, less length of ice, and a lot of evaporation, and so many effects are happening, even though it's our cleanest and top of the watershed chain. You don't have to read all of this, but it's important to understand that we are two sister organizations, the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy in Canada, a charity, Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy Inc. in the US. And as we had to set it up this way, it's been complicated and challenging, and has become even more so. And uh, but very encouragingly, such an important time to bring everybody together without a line through the lake. And it's kind of a weird thing, I guess, because of who's telling us they don't want a line through the lake. And as we go through this work together, we sort of hit upon three areas of importance to do this work. Conservation through our preserves, which is what land trusts mainly work on, or are widely known to work on. Education and active participation. But partnerships and community engagement, education, research, land preservation, these were all things. We kept ourselves really broad when we formed the organization. So we've tried a lot of different ways of approaching this. So through the conservation part, we are of a North American-wide land trust community. And it's an amazing community. I just put these numbers in there so you'd have some sense that they're the Land Trust Alliance across the United States. There's 950 members of the Alliance, but there's almost 1,300 land trusts in almost every state. There are 150 in Canada under the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts. Then ULTA is an amazing foundation organization for the land trusts in Ontario and very dedicated. We have 3 land trusts in our area, the Algoma Highlands Conservancy, the Kensington Conservancy down just east of the Sioux, and I'll be showing a map in a moment and showing you the Lake Superior community. And then I'll return to American Friends of Canadian Conservation, because it's an amazing mechanism for Americans who want to be able to preserve lands as Americans who own lands in Canada. So we are part of also another great community. I talked about the importance of being community. It's a Great Lakes, or even a Lake Superior, but I've included some that are a bit outside here. So I've said the Great Lakes Land Trust community. And then I kind of made this up. It might mean I've updated it as best as I can to make sure all the acreage is in preserves, but it gives you a bit of an idea of the scope. We're pretty small in the scheme of things when it comes to actually protecting land. We have 3 very specific ways to tell water stories. One is a height of land watershed forest, one is a wetland, and one is a group of islands. And but some of the others, and then like you can see the Kensington Conservancy to the right of the screen with the gold, downstream from the Sioux, of a cluster of amazing land trusts, 16 preserves. And then we've got the Algoma Highlands Conservancy. It looks small with the 2 green ones here on the eastern shore, but they own a lot of land and do amazing work. So in our area, we have like if you're an American, you know what a land trust is. Here in Canada, we're always asking people. And so that's why I like to start to just show people what a big community this. And in all our American bus tours we do with Road Scholar bus tours, everybody on every bus knows, from all across the United States, knows what land trusts are and what they do. So there's a lot of work to educate the Canadian public about this mechanism for protecting lands. So one of our preserves is a wetland on Chiwekwe Dong, which means the place that hugs you. And that is from Miriam Agawa, an elder who lives out at Guli Mission all her life. This place is not a land trust preserve to her. It's a place that's been her traditional lands and her it's the stories and the medicine places. And she shared a lot with us. And the Francis Hill part comes from a relationship with a landowner. So throughout this presentation, you'll notice that I do bring in Anishinaabemowin. I started a little bit with Anishinaabe Cree being invited up there last year, a little bit of Cree language that could be incorporated, but I feel very deeply that Indigenous languages the world over are incredibly important cultural connections to the climate change understanding and having a different relationship. Indigenous languages are relation. So the Gargantua Islands Preserve at Nanabajung is a very sacred and beautiful place on the eastern shore of Lake Superior. And this place here is atop of the watershed forest in the bottom southwest part. It's largely highland forest, hardwoods, and we really haven't done a lot with this preserve, but it helps us to tell these different stories. And then we're also part of the water trail community for Lake Superior. And this kind of was a natural segue for our work with the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy because we wanted to do education and we wanted to tie the water story together. And there was a really strong opportunity with Trans-Canada Trail to work with the North Shore. So that big blue line around the North Shore is a water trail that put in 1,000 kilometers with Trans-Canada Trail, and it connects with all those other water trails. And so it was a beautiful community of people and communities to work with. So there's conservation, and then there's education and active participation, and all three of those things go together. So if you have the preserves, you can do educational programs and active participation. If you have the water trail, you can do those things too. And the one thing that we learned in our work of the water trail was that the inset here that shows the 25,000 kilometer ocean to ocean to ocean trail, that this Lake Superior story, we started right from the get-go going to all the Indigenous communities that weren't able to talk to every single one of them, but we did the very best that we could from the Conservancy standpoint, bringing in our own funding to ensure that we looked at this from not just something that was in Canada, but that was connected to Turtle Island. And so it was a really interesting project that has two big superlatives to be connected. And it wasn't just about recreational trails, but it was about the Indigenous stories. So I'll come back to the three elements of this between the land preserves and then the water trail. A piece of the water trail that was really cool for us was developing the accessibility to the water. And one of the things we put was infrastructure from docks, pathways, washrooms, all of that kind of stuff. Once we developed this program to get people engaged with the landscape, because we really felt like there's no question that land-based learning, getting people out into nature is really the best way to go. But Lake Superior is a pretty big, formidable body of water. And Gary and I know it very well, having paddled it for many decades, and knew that we did not want to invite people here without also taking responsibility to develop some kind of program that we could get people safely on the water. They wouldn't need any experience or any equipment. So that's why we developed this Canoes for Conservation program, and it tied in really beautifully with the twin Saults and operating right out of Sault Ste. Marie, to be honest, because again, this river, there isn't any line out there, and it's the only outflow from the greatest lake on earth. So for most abilities, all ages, and no equipment or experience necessary. And I guess you'll notice that we launched the program in 2019. Yeah, Algoma paddlers, we had to train up Voyageur canoe certified. The Interpretive Guide Association is amazing, been around for like almost 30 years. They're out of the West, the Calgary Rocky Mountains, but Tracy Gage came over here and we ran our first interpretive guide certification program. Interpretation is different than just guiding. Interpretation is when you don't just, walk and paddle, and you're constantly making meaning from the places that you are in and connecting the meaning with people's lived lives in other places. If you really want people to go away and feel in their heart, not just, I learned this in my head, that remembrance comes from the ability of good interpretation. This migration image is to connect the flyways that connect the oceans and the continents. And in the same way that the birds flow across the skies like they're rivers of life, it's like the water that flows through the land. So we have all these different rivers and everything on the move, reminding us that nothing is an object, everything is a verb, everything's in relationship, and everything's connected. So relationship building. For land trusts, this can start with landowners. Well, it nearly always starts with landowners. Whether that landowner wishes to, in this case, it was a donated wetland. It can be a purchase that a land trust does, but it's usually like a landowner that has a deep love for a landscape that wants to see it conserved for perpetuity, the ecological values, and now we're moving into also cultural values of land. So though it's a 9-acre wetland, wetlands on Lake Superior are a rare commodity. And so every single one of them is important. And talking to the landowner about why this place is special, what we're going to do with this, with education, students, the public, and how this can become a voice for wetlands everywhere. They are one of the most important ecosystems on the planet. Engaging landowners in the activities of setting up a land trust. Other land trusts have like tons more experience than we do, obviously, because they have so many more land trusts. But those good and participating relationships really build. Often in land trusts, the world has been, for a lot of wealthy people, creating land trusts can actually value up their properties and protecting them, giving back to folks to be able to participate and enjoy nature. But there's a whole other side to that is being addressed now. And who gets to go to these places? Who gets to preserve these places? So this leaps back a little bit to education. One of our board members, Bob Moore, teachers from the Algoma District School Board, and then the Sioux Naturalist coming out, led by Sue Meads, an amazing botanist and artist in her own right. She's incredible with her husband, Bill. And all of these folks here, professionals and in a professional and just they love to do it all the time, identifying who lives here. And I use that word who really with great heart, that Indwe Maganadok, these are our relatives. So whether it's the spatulate sundews, and I don't know indigenous names for these plants in the way, if you've ever heard Joseph Pinawanakwat, I believe I got his name pronounced correctly. He's amazing the way he's been researching, uncovering, and delving into the knowledge of the bird world and the plant world to just create ways in which we can relate that these are not just objects, plants, but living beings whose home, this wetland is their home. So the pitcher plants across the wetland, And the students just absolutely love these plants and looking in the pictures. And there's a whole, I think it's on our website, a whole wonderful list of all the different plants and the different seasons that we have there. But the bog laurel that you're looking at right now, there's another pink plant comes later in the rose pogonia covers this little wetland, just it's pink in June. And on the 19th of June, Robert Rutledge comes out from the college and always does a talk here. Early on in the development of this project, we had Jim Fitton bring the students out from White Pines, and we had gotten a Great Lakes Guardian Fund grant to help us build a boardwalk that was expanded on during COVID, and it's created a lovely space for gathering for the students, and people go there all the time. And it's actually it's a barrier wetland. Like there's a sand barrier here between the lake and the wetland. So it's like permeable and the water comes in and it goes out. Right now it's completely filled with water. And then there's a wetland over across the road that feeds down into this, but it's a perfect place with the peatlands to talk about the sedges, to talk about all the gifts that wetlands give us. And this is a fen, which means it's a really rich wetland for its plant diversity. It's not real acidic, and that's because of all the water flow coming and going that refreshes the fen. And so there's a lot of different bird life here, and the students are just absolutely enthralled when we give them, magnifying glasses and we have them out there. And June is an especially good month for busyness at the boardwalk. Um, and yeah, this is our annual evening with Robert Rutledge, and he teaches at the college, and he's just such a joyful, wonderful teacher in nature. And yeah, he's just using some fun tests, showing us the acidity, the age of the wetland, the peatland, how it's holding the carbon. And then from there, we can extrapolate out in older students. We talk about the importance of the Hudson Bay, James Bay lowlands, and it leads to so many conversations around the importance of these places and the impacts that we can have even when we think we're going in a good direction with electrification. And now where do we get all of that, necessary ingredients for that from? Everything we do has an impact. Partnerships like the Invasive Species Center that gave us this wonderful boot brush station, and educating folks. And as you can see, it was Barb Nolan actually translated this into Anishinaabe-Moan. I'd love to get a recording from her so students that wish to listen could hear it in her language. I've recorded some folks so I can use a little bit during our, initial. We've had the Sioux College students out there. There's all kinds of cool studies that can happen. It's really pretty close to the Sioux. It's only 20 minutes outside of the Sioux. Kaylin Karskadden did Hebe's Nigrophorus, a burrowing beetle, a study that out of Trent University. She worked with the Canadian Forestry Center. I'm going to get the acronym wrong there. It's the one on Queen Street right near Ofri. And she had her team and she did this study all summer long, and she's going to be back in the Sioux again working. But one of the cool things we did was Indigenous ceremony, and her grandmother had this booklet, and one of the Indigenous elders asked her if she would do observation, not just research. And she even figured out ways to take less of the beetles' lives, recognizing that they were giving up their lives for this research. And so there was a lot of really good and healthy conversations that went on around the difference between observation and research and regarding the beings as this is their home. American Friends of Canadian Conservation. I touched on this. These may seem, in some ways, everything is climate change. Everything you can talk to, you can bring it back. But let's consider for a moment, as many American folks do own lands that they love for conservation and care. They own them in Canada. And so there's partnerships that American Friends for Canadian Conservation have with land trusts. They have to be in partnership with a land trust or an entity that can ultimately hold the piece of land. So for us, the Gargantua Islands were owned by Americans. And I know the Kensington Conservancy recently went through a process like this. So for Americans, they can they can get the tax benefits in Canada, which is the capital gains tax is something people don't know about, a lot of Americans, and it can really hurt them if they try to pass it down to the next generation. And they can figure out ways to, protect the lands they love. And then also there's tax benefits in the States. It's a conversation that any landowner would need to have with their own financial and, legal people to see what's best. But there are mechanisms for encouraging Americans to look at opportunities for protecting the conservation of the beautiful lands they love. So these incredible islands through Gargantua here, Sandy and her husband Craig were two of the founding people of American Friends, so a real gift working with them. People today know it as Lake Superior Provincial Park, but the park thought they owned the islands out there. And so interestingly, have that discovered and then to get into this relationship, what they fostered with us for a number of years before the islands were given over into our care. So just so everybody understands too, that land trusts hold for perpetuity in their care. So a land trust can be owned by, a land trust can own the land, or they can also hold a conservation easement on a private property where it travels with the deed of the property. So all future landowners, a covenant is put on the land or part of the land or a wetland or a piece of the forest. And that responsibility is held by the land trust to ensure that the care of that is there forever. And for the landowner, it ensures that is going forward as well. So it's a really beautiful relationship, and it requires, a certain amount of education. Accessibility, infrastructure, and planning of the Trans-Canada project. I'm going to lead back again to this because in listening to, people of all abilities and certainly communities in inner cities who also come from, maybe my immigrant families, or all kinds of impediments exist for people to actually get into the outdoors, be they physical or cultural, financial, economic, all kinds of reasons. And yet all communities of people, and especially students everywhere, they know about the climate crisis. And there's nothing more invigorating and nothing more that meets your heart and makes you work towards all of this no matter what when you get out into nature. So this was a project we did with Trans-Canada Trail, was to actually map the whole 22-kilometer John Roswell Hub Trail, which goes all around. It's a very popular trail, but working with folks that have a disability, mapping it with this special technology. I was just a helper, but we put all of that data in, and they're doing this with this app everywhere, and it's all led by people who can see all of the different ways that we could augment and make things better. So it was a really great opportunity because the bigger and more diverse our community is there to speak on caring for our planet, learning about it in such diverse ways, having conversations with people in all walks of life is made possible the more we make places available, accessible. This accessibility piece of the Big Canoe was for us to actually start with just people who lived in Sault Ste. Marie. People in 10 years, there hadn't been a local vessel to get people out on the water. And now you could get out on the water in this really intimate way. And we did it in a very ecological, but also cultural way. So we really had, it was great. Actually, COVID was really interesting because we had communities of people that came from all the way from Toronto, stayed overnight. They came as a cohort, and then they stayed, and they all came just to get on the river and do this experience. It was so heartening, and the multi-generational effect of it was really cool because a lot of different cultures put a lot of value, or a lot of their life is community. And and so, you know, we see these multi-generational families where everybody could participate. And the indigenous communities in our area, we really learned a lot about, you know, hey, this is my culture, but I've never held a paddle in my hand. Paddling Gichichiman, or um, the big canoe is I haven't even paddled a canoe. And so to get out on the water and then have teachings come back to us through other cultures, and especially indigenous people who live in our area right here in this river that flows by, who's, you know, for time immemorial, their family connections. So this led to a big, wonderful partnership with the Métis community in 2023, because the Anglican Church, through Truth and Reconciliation, a gift of the Anglican Church, which was actually sited right on a Métis burial ground, was gifted back to the Métis and was proven out to be a good set of buildings. There's 3 of them. And so we decided we could try to do these walking, paddling tours, and they would be Indigenous led, but we would provide the infrastructure for it and the training and the water part of it. So this was a wonderful way of learning about the community. And you can see the Métis Center is, Heritage Center is very close to the river. And so this, that green there is actually the hub trail, but now we have like a set of walking. But there's a little thin blue line above the word Coast Guard, the W in waterfront. That is actually Fort Creek, and it comes down past the Heritage Center and sees the light of day. It's been underground for like 6 kilometers, coming down from the high point at Fort Creek Conservation Area. And we have a wonderful storytelling opportunity of connecting Fort Creek, its cultural heritage, the Métis family story, and the lots along the river, of course, fishing, the Indigenous responsibility, foods from the land. Everything is wrapped up in a beautiful cultural, ecological way whenever you can find a way to uplift Indigenous voices, wisdom, knowledge. And it isn't just to go and find something and say, hey, can you do this or open something for us? Or it is actually like really, this was such a solid, wonderful partnership, because after 2 years of doing the administration and running this, we always wanted it to go back, like, and the Métis Center is actually fully opening this year. And so we're handing over Métis tours, and we'll facilitate the water pieces until they, you know, have folks that can do this. So it's deeply part of their cultural heritage is the big canoe. And people have come from all over the world experiencing this, to see the river, to learn the stories, and these stories being shared in a waterway for us on a river that we always, you know, point out no one else recognizes you know, a line here. These waters have been flowing, and the fish, the birds, the animals, and it gives us all these wonderful things to you know, share. So 3 areas of climate action. I have I found it quite hard to limit myself to what I was trying to get to this evening, and what was the real big message that I wanted to come back. Well, protecting land protects water and life. So the work that land trusts do is really incredible. And of course, creating and participating land-based programming, learning, participation in the outdoors, on whatever scale you can do it, is deeply important. And doing it in an interpretive, guided way that really brings meaning and is done in a, you know, a kind of like, you don't give everybody everything, a smorgasbord. You learn how to bring like a package to them in a way that they take home in their hearts and their heads. But building Indigenous relationships to support Indigenous-led actions and learn from Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous voices has been a really big part of what we've been trying to do for a number of years. And this is Miriam Agawa and Josie. You met through my piece of artwork at the beginning there. I was working with her for a whole summer with the Conservancy, sharing some cedar tea that's been harvested from the land here. And Miriam sharing with us stories about Chiwekwedong, the wetland, in a lot of it, she says, there are plants I won't share. My knowledge will only goes because I'm very nervous about them, being abused or all picked or whatever. And so in this sharing, one's got to be very cognizant and careful of what, and this gives you, it's a lot of respect, a lot of listening. And um, Myrna Mashano, she lives up in Beektagong Nishnabeg, and that is up near Puckasaw National Park. And during the water trail, language, this partnership with this First Nation, it was the only official partnership we had with the trail, but they were already engaged in a land trail and working with Trans-Canada Trail. And the signage, getting all that language right. It wasn't about taking English language and saying, here, can you translate this? What do you want to say? You tell us, and then we figure out from there what's said. It's not like translation is very important, that it's not given as, here's my English, now turn this into Anishinaabe, or Cree, or whatever. Shirley Horn is a beloved elder in our area, and Gary and I have had the lovely times with Shirley, doing a water day with her, World Water Day, near the river. And just the Kasanagan in the little birch bark baskets to represent actually larger birch bark baskets that would harvest sap at this time of the year, the use of the birch bark, the storytelling. And then we went down to the river, and the kids put their little, it was like a kind of, and they saw the current carrying little offerings away up the river. And the idea that them going on the journey and looking at the map, where were they going? Having opportunities to be in collaboration with Batchewana First Nation, for instance. Juliana Lesage Corbiere, who's speaking there in her beautiful skirt. Nakwesh Koda, sorry, Nakwesh Koda Ding, Nebe Angers. Coming together for the water was a ceremony, a opportunity, a gathering that we did at the locks. Actually, it was during COVID. We had to keep our tables kind of separate and so on, but we were able to actually have small groups of people in the middle of the canoe. It was kind of a bit of a downtime for it not being too bad. But anyways, we didn't want a huge crowd of people there, but we had a nice gathering of folks the college was there, the invasive species were there, different organizations were there. And it was all around the partnership of learning about water, learning about, all of these elements that are brought to bear of the power of nature and the changes that are being brought about through climate change, can really be felt and learned when we take time to see and learn through an Indigenous lens. Up on the shores of Lake Superior, our first summer before COVID, we were doing tours at the Batchewana. We were going up as far as the pictographs, and it was always really wonderful when we had folks from Batchewana, or especially Indigenous people who had never been able to visit them before, but to see them from the water. But of course, everyone participating. It was just a beautiful way is to use props. So we have a lovely whitefish, kind of a spoiler there if you come on our tours, but that fish is a very accurate representation of the whitefish, because it's such a rich telling story about the connection of food, the gifts of this river. One of the big, huge stories is the whitefish from this river. And of course, we tell, the story around the sea lamprey and other species living. And I love to be able to tell more of the little critters that live down in the sediments in the bottom of the river. So finding ways to support Indigenous-led land trusts and land back opportunities. I'm just about at the end here, but We actually had a private landowner. This is not a finished project yet, but I can give the broad strokes of it. That as soon as Gary and I saw where this piece of property was, that this woman and her family wanted to do something with it. It had been passed down through a number of generations. And she said, I don't know, we want to see it come into conservation. We're really not sure where to start. And after I spend more time talking with her over, a number of conversations, I had led with Gary and I looked at this and said, this is in the traditional territory of, and we know that First Nations community and people really well. And we wanted to bring that forward. And right away, she said, it's been 10 years thinking about this. And we've been thinking about how do we do this? Where do we go? We would love this to be a land back opportunity back to the first people whose, traditional lands these are. So it's kind of working its way along, and it's new territory for us for sure. But there is a lot of wisdom and knowledge out there, and I have a lot of resources. Ontario Land Trust Alliance, they have a great portal for Indigenous resources. The Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts does as well. And it's been a real gift to now have an Indigenous board member on both sides of the medicine line for us at the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy. Um, uh, Chief Mashano of an Indigenous community, Bigtagong Nishnabeg, on the North Shore that we've also known for many years. Just having the opportunity to be paddling one of the rivers that flows through this watershed back to the waters of Lake Superior. He's bringing his granddaughter along. He's got all these youth involved in this journey. And it was to rediscover, like, where does Bigtagong Nishnabeg is right at the mouth of the river that is called the Pink River when you go in there, but that's not how it's known. And there's all this language and learning, and they even rediscover the growing of the rice in the upper watershed, and the elders are following. And this amazing ceremony at the end of this journey, where the whole community came out and they were on the bridge and they were drumming, and it was like a big welcoming home, and there was a feast, and it was such he's so engaged. And there's actually a little film online, and if anybody's interested, I can post it in the chat and have a look, because it's a wonderful little film to see. And I just want to end with our relatives. Um, the earth over, our relatives far older than us and who have so much experience to teach us so much, from the insects to the birds to the amphibians to the mammals. Uh, there is so much life that has lived here hundreds and thousands of times longer than we have been on this planet. And our culture does not make us as humble and as relationship as it could. So that is why I come back to, wherever there's possibility to sit in ceremony, sit in a circle, listen and learn, try and, the Indigenous languages are really beautiful because they really give you those words. It isn't one of the worst words we have in the English language is the. As soon as it's the lichen, it's not this incredible being that is getting its sustenance from the air, breathing, and we have to see more verb action in our relationship. We're not in the water. The immersion in water is, almost three-quarters ourselves. And so if we stop and we think about this a bit more, it starts to break down barriers, well, hopefully, between there's a lot of divisiveness in the world, and we know what's propelling it. We know You know, it's just a really complicated life out there right now with the anger, divisiveness, and it is not going to go away anytime soon. But getting out into nature helps all of us to keep grounded in our work that oftentimes feels really, really difficult right now. And yeah, I just love the image rain here of the drops. We are these drops no matter where we live, where we come from. And we are blessed on Lake Superior in the north here to see these dark night skies and the stories that the universe around us tells us about this gift of a place that we live on. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I do think the northern night skies are one of the most beautiful things that we experience on the shores of Lake Superior. Um, I would want to give you some time to answer some questions here. So I'm just going to put my email up here because maybe if I don't find that link, but you really would like it, please take a picture or send me a text. I would love you to see that film. It's short, it's fun, and you'll have a piece of Lake Superior and learn a little bit more about that First Nation community. Okay, I'm gonna stop share if I can figure out how to do that. Stop share. Okay.
All right. Well, I know Peter has had his hand up for quite a while.
Oh, hi, Peter.
Oh, he's playing.
You are
Oh,
needing to turn off your or turn your thing on.
yeah. You're muted right now.
You're
Sorry
muted.
about that. I apologize. I can't remember why I had my hand up. I think it was about
Oh,
American Friends.
hmm.
But I put in the chat if anybody has sort of specific questions about how that process. I'm on their board of directors, and
Oh,
I had 10 years. I was the founding president of the Kensington Conservancy in 2 countries, just like you. And but you know that goes back like almost 20 years. So, anyways, so I'm really familiar with this cross-border stuff. So
excellent, excellent. I'm so
passport
glad
from
you're
the
here.
state. My voting record is no 3 times, but I've spent half my time in Canada back and forth. So I'll be back up on Friday. So, but any questions about how the cross-border stuff works? I've had quite a bit of experience with it. So
I know Carter and I have talked a bit, and I'd love to do another of those opportunities for people to learn more about in our area, hold some kind of gathering and share knowledge about this. I think there are a lot of people who would be interested.
yeah, and you raised a good point about streamlining how we talk about it. I mean, I use
Mhm.
a lot of the times with really uninitiated people, I'll say voluntary conservation agreements. It's a
Mhm.
voluntary act, it's a conservation agreement. And
Yeah,
it's because easements, people,
yeah.
it's the driveway easement across their neighbor's bush lot and all the complications. That's what people think of when they think of easements. So, yeah.
So if anyone has a question, you can please raise your hand. That is electronically, or can try like so. But also, yeah, you could put any questions you might have in the chat itself.
How far afield have people come from? Are now, Peter, you're not even in Canada right now, but
I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I'm about
okay, okay.
6 hours drive away. Yeah.
Jerry, where are you situated right now?
I'm in Toronto or Toronto, the traditional unceded territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Mississaugas of the Credit. Yeah, dish with one spoon territory or treaty. I did have a question actually. Actually, Peter and Joanie, either of you can feel free to answer it. First of all, thank you so much for, yeah, not only your passion was so clearly articulated throughout this presentation. I had my jaw literally dropped when I saw your paddling route. I was like, oh wow, that must have been quite the trip. And without GPS back then, or at least without Google Maps. So extra kudos to you there.
None of this stuff.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I could do it. So that is super, super cool. Um, and I have questions related to that, but might be for another time. But yeah, I love that you talked a lot about, connection using language, connection using land, and then also reconciliation throughout a lot of your work. What I'm very curious about, and I don't know, I don't mean for this to come off negatively at all, but I'm really curious about like how do you see land trusts intersecting with like the goals of like the land back movement, for example? Is that like a common theme that is happening and is being talked about within the land
Yeah,
trust?
it's a fantastic question, and I could have spent a good deal of this really going to that because
kind
the
of
land,
uh,
yeah, the land trust movement has been like all protected areas that have been led in by colonial settler people, have really completely missed the story, which is a very harmful and cruel story of expelling people from the land. I think all of us sitting here know these stories now, and the Truth and Reconciliation opportunity it was an opportunity for us to learn. And so I put up Minoa Key because Becky Big Canoe formed a land trust under the structure of the land trust, an Ontario land trust, and she's incorporated. And I asked her on a call the other day with it's an Indigenous led circle around personhood of water. And it's that, when you have a place, you're isolated from holding ceremony, medicines. It's about food security. Like there are all kinds of really interesting, and it's not like in the ways that land has been protected in the past has been put away for who, and who gets to have access to it, and what you need to even get to those protected places. So the land trust movement has been having a lot of internal look, and the Land Trust Alliance, in fact, gave us a grant 2 years ago, and the talks are still continuing. Cindy Crow from Blue Sky up on near Thunder Bay has been leading these, but the funds were able to be for looking at Indigenous ways to protect land through caring for water. I had no idea like what we would really like be able to actually. I just knew if it was Indigenous land, it would be. So that's what the example of, it was a pretty good grant. It was like $10,000, and that the Land Trust Alliance really were very open to how this would work, and then handing it over and let it be Indigenous led. And I even tried like, oh, don't we need an agenda? And then I even recorded it the first time around. I was like, oh my God. So we're all going to make mistakes, and we might get, some like, but you got to be prepared for that. So I think that when we show up and we keep showing up and we keep trying, and we just, walk into the band office, walk in and see folks, people, I think it's just really important that we don't weight people down with, hey, I'm starting this, here, I want you to, that's where we are sort of with our project right now, is that the expectation for, First Nation to set up their own land trust, that is a lot to ask. An Indigenous community might never want to do that, but there could be ways, to work together for more land back opportunities, which there's a great series that the Suzuki Foundation put called Land Governance, Past, Present, and Future. If any of you haven't seen that, that's really an excellent watch as well. Anyway, sorry, I'm doing all the talking. You're supposed to ask me questions. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'll definitely check out the David Suzuki resource for sure.
Joanie, maybe could you, it's interesting, very interesting, certainly understandable and admirable, your your interest in preserving water and wild places. There's a number of different organizations or different people, even in this area, in the Algoma area, that are also working on this. Like there's Sue Chiblo down in Garden River, and there's the Waterwise people at Algoma. Do you guys get together?
I know Jody Rebeck and Waterwise, and a couple years ago, we did like 2 or 3 World Water Day events together. The biggest challenge is capacity. Obviously, we have this mechanism now. We don't have to do the driving like we did. Um, our organization, fundamentally, we've tried too many things over the years, trying, really, we've been trying to just get back to the roots and really like become a lot smaller in order to become bigger, to do the things that we want to do. And it's one of those balance things where the projects and programs people, like you need people who are able to be smart with the funding and the partnerships and putting all those things together. So I absolutely agree, Rob. I think that Elaine at the university, Haute-Saône, who's with Nordic, she did an amazing job really kind of bringing people together during the water agency talks. It was too bad we didn't get the Canada Water Agency in Sault Ste. Marie, but I feel like, and there's the whole community of people with like the BPAC folks, and like there's so many different things going on, which we are a water place. So to that end, I haven't really answered it, but yes, we do. And I think there is more happening. The other day there was an uh, I'll leave it there. The biggest thing is the upending of what's happening across the border because of all the network in the Great Lakes. Every single organization, as we know, is just like no one knows where they're going to land tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So we just
That time horizon is too long. It's like, next time.
no,
Literally.
yeah.
Can I just make a quick comment on Rob's thing?
Yeah.
So there is a donor in Toronto who is keenly interested in trying to unite the conservation and water groups in the Northern Ontario around kind of a unified vision. And it would potentially come with fairly significant grant money, but the goal would be to build a table up there and have the participants build the table and determine who is there, and then ultimately to distribute. It could be amongst themselves, or it could be outside this grant money. So it could be to say, no, I mean, you could have 10 organizations at the table, hypothetically, 8 of whom don't get a penny because they collectively decide. So it's a participatory grant making using kind of more indigenous governance structures. And I had a conversation with them 2 weeks ago, something like that. And I said, I think that sounds great. And I can open all these doors, with the organizations, and then they, just to get it started, or put the 2 or 3 chairs at the table, and then it's up to them. But I said, I think that if there was, instead of saying, let's all get together and be friends, if you have a common reason to come together, at least initially, and so this conversation I had, maybe it was more like 3 weeks, I'd have to go through my notes. This was the day after Mark Carney at his campaign event in BC talked about 10 new national parks across Canada as part of his conservation vision. And so the question was, does it make sense that one of those 10 wind up in Northern Ontario or in the Lake Superior area? Is it a economic development strategy for Northern Ontario? Is it preserving land? Is it part of give back? Is it something really big? And does this group want to come together around that initially, and then hopefully it will endure, and to see if there's a vision for what that could look like in order to recommend it to the federal government.
Well, I think like one of the things that we have going for us in our area is it um, it's such a hub to speak of the connectivity because with the indigenous nations between and I know it's always hard not to be political, but this is like non-political here. This is about our planet and water connecting us and the Great Lakes and the threats that the Great Lakes are under from a number of things, which are like getting exacerbated right now. And there's the network of the Great Lakes Network and Freshwater Future is fantastic for bringing people together. And I think it really needs to be strongly Indigenous led. So I just, anyway, you didn't really ask me to answer in a big, long way, but I think it really is important that it doesn't become a slow motion thing. In the, I look at the National Marine Conservation Area on the North Shore, and it's there's still so many layers of paperwork. And it feels like, I don't know, I've never worked for the federal government, but it's very important that action really happen. Like we can't afford the lengthy legs of time. So if that was to be the case of you know, protected areas, then that you know, it needs to be done in a timely way and very much bringing in the Indigenous cultural leadership. So it's done in the right way.
Thank you for indulging me with this question, because I knew I had this conversation with the Toronto Foundation, whenever, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'd have to look, but I knew that this was coming up, and then a couple of these other things, and I'm like, well, I will be the focus group leader. put the idea out there and then take it back to them. So,
well, we have such a wealth of Western science knowledge in our area alone. Like, I am not a scientist, but I know our area is just rich with, you know, people who've spent their entire lives. And I feel like there's a lot of people across the border right now who have like a wealth of knowledge that they would like to, you know, be able to. But in any case, that
do you know where they all live?
Do I know where they all live? Well, you got a lot of them in Ann Arbor.
Ann Arbor is
I
where all
know.
the
You
Great
folks
Lakes
just
government labs
retired
are
from
they're all
NOAA,
here.
and they live next to us in Gooley when they're not
NOAA,
down.
USGS.
Yeah, all the weather folk and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So if we can think of the big canoe, and the big canoe holds the, you know, it holds, so the like the Western science is held in this bigger knowledge piece. That's the way I like viewing it, so that we don't get into the little, and I mean, I don't work in these worlds, and Rob, excuse me for but it's I think people are coming together more with all of their knowledges, and I'm definitely not organized to be able to read stuff, but I would love to be part of it in any way whatsoever.
Well, I did have one more question for you. Well, I have
Yeah.
millions of questions and we could talk canoeing forever, but um, could you talk a little bit about connectivity? I know there's interest, you know, you're talking about water connectivity, and we often think about that in terms of land connectivity, and there are various initiatives now for corridors and so forth. But what's the importance of connectivity of water?
Well, when it came to land trusts, like historically, you know, you've got your okay, this is the line around this piece of property that we own. And right from the get-go, it was like, well, whatever's happening to the water upstream is affecting this property through which it flows, and whatever happens here affects everything downstream. And so the idea that you could somehow cut off a piece of property, a forest, anywhere. The idea of water is that it flows like the blood through our veins, is that there isn't just a heart sitting there, but it's not an object, it's just a flow of blood. And so this idea of a wetland not being just a preserve, but that the water, as wetlands are a beautiful place, but I love this one on Gooley Bay is just like so neat, the way the water is always on the move, and you talk about it's just a constant flow of water. And then you talk about this with the forest, and this time of the year is great to talk about it when we don't look at like the maple trees. Everybody gets it when they can see the rivers of water flowing through the trees. So it's back to that idea of a verb-based, relationship-based experience with the land that sustains us. And I think that's what water does, is it turns it into an active verb relationship activity rather than an object of the way we look at the forests or the animals or the resources. We always talk about the resources. Anyway, that's, I don't know. And the connectivity is that we live in the Great Lakes. So very viscerally and tangibly, we are very connected when we turn our taps on, and we see across the United States, the biggest environmental interest for people is clean drinking water. Well, we'd add accessible, affordable, clean drinking water for everyone to that. And everything we do that affects water, whether it's taking it out of the ground, taking it out of the basin, putting chemicals in it, the algae blooms, all the different effects that'll be exacerbated by the heating waters, the loss of waters, the drought, all of these things, water is telling us an enormous story. And I guess that's what I'd like to say about that.
Well, thank you. And I'm not sure if anyone else has a question. Please just jump in. Question or a
Yeah, I do
comment?
actually. So I'm actually involved with the Climate Reality Project Canada. I've been the regional organizer for Southeastern Ontario for the past 4 years. And I've come to water in a really interesting way. It was about whether water has life in its cells or whether it's dead water. And so I learned about that, I think, in about 1980, it was 95, something like that, because there is a Japanese man who did a little book, and some scientists were referring to it at Health Canada, where I was working back then. And so there's a lot about water that when we talk about, live water or living water, exactly, different chemical components and magical components. And so I'm seeing that in what you've been describing, Joanie, in your talk today. My question is about specifically getting to know the Sault Ste. Marie Climate Hub, whether you have connections to the Biosphere Reserves networks that are here in Canada. We have about 19 of them, and I don't see your name in one of them. And so I'm wondering if you're aware of them and how you might engage with them and what might be your future vision to include your name on the list.
I'd love to have more of a conversation about this. When we first started this organization, we actually had people come up and talk to our board, and we were really like engaged with the whole way of approaching this in this way. And I mean, frankly, it's just been it was a challenge, right, from 20 years ago to just really make the vision of it's such a vast scale that this geographically and just pulling that network of people. But I would love to get back to that. And really, it's just one of those things. I guess it's kind of it's never far away, but you send me your contact info there, Janet. I'd love to have a conversation. with
Yeah, because
you about
here,
it.
you know, I'm located, so greetings from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe. So I'm in Ottawa. I'm located in Ottawa, 10 blocks from Parliament, but I also have a cabin out in Lanark County. And in Lanark County, we have an organization called Plenty Canada, who is a key lead in the Niagara Escarpment Biosphere Network. And so that's all I hear them talk about all the time. And of course, we have Sarah Harmer, who's quite involved in that because of the reform of gravel mining, right? And so I hear about it constantly, but I've also been hearing about it between Canadians and Americans around the Great Lakes who are doing some research projects in living cities. So I think, you know, if that's an area of interest, I think there are things about, and this is, you know, Sherry's listening to me, is, you know, having hubs around, you know, different places in the network that are not just, you know, there because UNESCO is there, but we're actually looking at the evolving climate reality and, you know, having a focus on that. And, you know, water is a key part. And it is political, right? Water in many instances. Yeah, so I'll send you, well, I'll just, yeah, I put the Biosphere Reserves Network in the chat. And
Thanks.
then,
Well, thank you. And Peter, there is a note for you in the chat from with regard to connections. So Sherry, I think, put something there. So at this point, I think we'll have to end this webinar and say thanks so much to Joanie. That was an excellent presentation, and what a worthwhile project the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy is.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, all of you, for coming this evening. I'm going to go and have my anniversary dinner with Gary. My
Oh,
93-year-old
so it's
mom.
the actual day.
No,
That's
I'm
exciting.
just, they said they would wait for me because I said I'm too nervous to have dinner. So Gary's made dinner, and it's just an exciting way to spend this special day for me, or this evening. So thank you for the conversations, and I look forward to meeting up with all of you again, and sooner rather than later.
Okay, just a quick note before we move along. Next month, our webinar features Lauren Morin from the community. She is the Community Programs Manager at Harvest Algoma. And Harvest Algoma is a local food resource center with a mission to increase food security, reduce food waste, and offer educational experiences around food systems and their impacts on the environment. Now, at this point, I'm going to ask those that are still on just to join, or to you know, you can sign off too, but over the next 30 minutes or so, we're happy to have Sherry Wu, the Community Hubs Manager from the Climate Reality Project Canada, to lead us to lead a space for community updates, intel sharing, and you can stay whether you're a part of the hub, a climate reality leader, or just looking to plug into local work. You're warmly welcome to stay. So Sherry, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Okay, I guess we will stop recording at this stage.
Yeah, we can stop recording.
Sherry, I feel incredibly
Um,
relieving at this point.